Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our newest episode of Venturous Podcast. Yes, and today we're going to talk about the topic of vaccine, especially vaccine in Singapore. Why? Because we today we invited the guest that is currently living in Singapore, and she is our friend as well. Her name is Jen. She was one of our friends during our university time back in Kyoto. She's currently living and working in Singapore in a medical institution. So we invited Jen to ask about the vaccines update in Singapore as well. Because of Jen is working in the medical institution, we want to know how is the vaccine updates and what is uh, the details about the vaccine that has been distributed, especially in Singapore. So yeah, please enjoy this episode, and I hope you like it. Thank you. Okay, here is our friend Jen. So Jen, please
Hi.
introduce yourself.
Okay, hi guys. So I am a friend of all these wonderful people. I graduated from Ritsumeikan University in 2019, and I've been working at Raffles Medical Group, one of the private healthcare institutions in Singapore since last year. So I might not be like medically certified doctor or nurse, but I can brief you about the situation in Singapore and the progress about the vaccination of the COVID-19 vaccine. So hope you learn something and take away some useful tips or items.
Yes, thank you, Jen, for joining us today. Uh, okay, moving on to the interview. So, yeah, I know you're living in Singapore, Jen, as you mentioned. So, what is the latest updates regarding the vaccination there in Singapore, Jen? If you can tell us what is happening.
So I think in the past 3-4 months since the vaccine was introduced as and labeled as safe for usage after research, Singapore Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong actually informed that by Q3 of 2021, which is maybe about September, October, all Singaporeans should have received the vaccination across island wide. So they're doing it in phases. I think when the vaccine first came in January, around January, February, Chinese New Year time, it was the prioritization based on the industry that you work. So healthcare workers like myself who go to the hospital day in, day out, nurses, doctors will need to get vaccinated. People who work like frontline workers, security officers in ICA, which is the Immigration Center, Immigration Checkpoint Authority in Singapore that controls people coming in and out will need to be vaccinated. Security officers like Certis Cisco, one of the company, will get vaccinated. So basically, people in the front line gets vaccinated first because the logic behind that is they handle and meet a lot of variety of people. So to minimize the chances that they are the carriers and super spreaders, that's who they would target first. And then comes the second phase, which is the elderly, people aged I think 65 years and above, which prone to diseases. If they contract COVID-19, in terms of complications, they would be more dire. So they are the second batch of people to be vaccinated. And I think just last week, they have recently announced that people aged between 45 to 64 are allowed to receive their vaccinations. Teachers and again, frontline workers would get the priority to be vaccinated. So they're doing it in phases. Not everybody would get the vaccines. Not everyone is eligible. Yet they have to register their interest, and then they would receive the vaccine according to the vaccination center that they are designated to.
Okay, thank you, Jen. I'm just curious about this, but in Singapore, what type of the vaccine that the Singapore government uses?
Right. So that's I think that's one of the crucial questions that a lot of Singaporeans as well as foreigners are asking. There's a lot of vaccine varieties out there. I'm sure you read the news. First it was Pfizer, then Moderna, then of course in China it's mainly Sinovac. recently there's a lot of cases about the AstraZeneca. So in Singapore, I think they go by the approval by WHO. So when the World Health Organizations deem that a vaccine is safe for usage, then Singapore would actually engage to actually bring it in. So of course, the first vaccine that they actually ordered was Pfizer, because that was the first vaccine to kind of be cleared. They brought that in, and second came Moderna, and I think they brought in Sinovac about 3 to 4 weeks ago. But they're still testing. Moderna just got the clear to actually be administered. So I think in a couple of weeks' time, the vaccination centers will actually also be using Moderna. Pfizer was first. I received my Pfizer vaccine already. Then Moderna, and then Sinovac is still kind of in the research. So once it's approved, then I think it will have to go ahead.
So while we're still on the topic, I was wondering, so does the general public in Singapore have any preferences as to which vaccine they can get? Are they allowed to choose?
No, they actually don't get to choose. I mean, they raise the questions, as in what is the difference in efficacy, what are the side effects, but I think because it goes through phases of approval. So first it was WHO, and then when Singapore bring it in, there will be the Ministry of Health, we call it MOH, that does the again another check to actually test its safetiness and levels of effectiveness. So once they kind of approve, then the government allows it to be used by the public. Then the government gives the green light to be administered. So in terms of safety, Singaporeans, I think in general, gets the reassurance that it's not just any type of vaccine. It's a vaccine that has been deemed safe, not only by the World Health Organization, but by the other healthcare authorities in Singapore. So they can indicate their preference, but most of the time they don't get to choose. Like they don't get to choose, oh, I want the Moderna or I want the Pfizer. When they get directed to a vaccination center, they get administered the vaccine that that we currently provide, which I think right now is still Pfizer. Slowly in phases they bring in Moderna. Yeah.
I just have one question in terms of public's acceptance towards the vaccine. Can we say that most of the Singaporeans are trusting the vaccines at the moment?
I have to say the general receptiveness is positive. If given a chance, they would want to receive the vaccine. I do have clients asking whether they can actually sign their staff or their employees to receive the vaccines. So there is a demand. But of course, it's not, the vaccines are not profitable and we're not selling it per se. It's really by the approval by the healthcare authorities, and on a priority basis, it's in phases, and it's not something that people can kind of request to buy in bulk for their family or for their friends. It's not, yeah.
Okay, just another question. So in terms of the distribution of the vaccines, did the government face any challenges in terms of distributing it to the people?
No, I think one thing that I must really commend the Singapore government is that in terms of coordinating these mass scales exercises, be it like swab centers or vaccination centers, we call it, it's always done in a very systematic order. So they would kind of engage the healthcare providers, like the main healthcare providers in Singapore, to kind of be the distributors or kind of set up the vaccination centers and roll out the operations to ensure that they can meet the target that is set by the government. Yeah.
Jen, speaking about challenges, right? Pretty sure all countries have people who kind of oppose the idea of getting vaccinated. How big do you think the audience or the people who kind of reject the idea of getting vaccinated, and what do you think is the biggest reasoning for those people?
I think in Singapore, the general public is mostly positive in terms of receiving the vaccines. Those that kind of don't want to receive the vaccine are either concerned because they have prior health conditions, meaning people who are on long-term medication, people who have chronic illnesses. Of course, I mean, and in consideration of the age, people who are going through, let's say, chemotherapy or going through, let's say, some healthcare programs, they might be more concerned because we still do not know the complete adverse side effects of the vaccine. So obviously, I think it's a human reaction to kind of be skeptical about the things that they're injecting into their body. Yeah, I think the general reason for not receiving the vaccines is more personal in terms of how it implicates their health negatively, because you still don't know what the negative implications are.
One more question. From what you said earlier, it seems like Singapore has a pretty well thought out plan about the phases and also the plan with vaccinating everyone by the Q3 of the 2021. So do you think Singapore will accept foreigners anytime soon?
Singapore is in the discussion. I think the most recent countries were Taiwan, Australia, that they're considering to have like a vaccination bubble. I think people are generally lethargic. Singapore is limited in terms of holiday destinations. Not to say that we do not have them, but a lot of us kind of have the habit of traveling overseas. So I think the government is doing it cautiously. They're not just opening up their borders to any country right now. It has to be proven that there is no new COVID cases, or the community spread is kept to a minimum. And it is in the discussion. There are kind of questions where if I get vaccinated, does that mean that I can go overseas? The government has responded that it's still in discussion, that they are not 100% sure, because first and foremost, they need to ensure that the country is stable, that in case of an outbreak, it is kept to like a minimum, and to ensure that any country that they have this discussion with has also a proven track record of keeping the cases to a very, very minimal level, to ensure that people can travel but stay safe at the same time.
Okay, Jen, thank you very much for your beautiful answers. I think you have answered some of the government handling for the vaccination. I think we should move on to more on the public response for the vaccination, because I think not only in Singapore, all over the world, the public's response is massive. And I think in this case, Joe has a question for you to ask.
Right. So I think, before I already asked about the public's preferences, if there was any. But another question that I had in mind regarding this is, like in times of crisis, such as like the current pandemic, like we usually often see a lot of fake news and hoaxes spreading around the public, right? So, and some would even say that hoaxes spread faster than the virus itself. So, how prevalent are fake news surrounding COVID vaccines in Singapore? And are there any notable ones that you can mention, perhaps?
To be honest, I've not seen a fake news or meme that is going around. There was an incident where an individual was actually injected 5 vials of the vaccine. So, I mean, because when you receive the vaccine, you need to dilute it first. That is the pretext of it. What happens was that there was this individual that I think that they didn't dilute this vaccine first. So when they injected it to an individual, they received like a 5 vial. So there was a meme going around that when they received it, they become like this muscular SpongeBob version. I don't know if you have ever seen that picture, but that was what was going around. I can send you that meme if I
can imagine it.
But in terms of fake news, I think Singaporeans are more sensitive in that sense. They generally they understand that it's a national crisis, it's a worldwide crisis. So we don't kind of joke around about these things as freely. We understand the importance of it. We read up about it if we don't understand the risk and some of the causes of it. So I've not come across any major hoax or fake news that is newsworthy per se. So I don't think that there is a lot of that going on around.
Does the government play an active role in suppressing this fake news, do you think? Or do you think it's just like natural, Singaporean reaction who believe in more scientific results?
I think it's a possibility that the government does regulate the news that goes out, especially with regards to COVID-19. But of course, like I mentioned, any vaccine or any medical items that go out on the market has to be tested by the government first. Because it's a life and death situation, basically. And we do want the general public. I think the Singapore government has constantly reinforced that they want Singapore to achieve like a herd immunity within the community, which, to be very honest, I think that it is a logical strategy if you want to ensure that the community can go back to sort of like the new normal, right? So, while there is a possibility, I must say, there might be a possibility that the government does regulate the news that goes out. And, the government does have a very strict policy about fake news, not just about COVID, but about any kind of news that goes out there. But that of course is a different topic. So, there is a possibility, I must say, that the government does control. But in the case of COVID-19, not very much. I think it's also because the demographic of the people who received it, they're all elderly or healthcare providers or security officers. Not really the best people to kind of spread hoax, given the age demographic. Maybe if they roll it out to like people from the media or all those, maybe there is a change. Could be. But for now, I think it's also tied to who has received the vaccine and whether those group of people have a tendency to post memes or hoax.
I see. Adding to that, I want to ask about what do you think differs Singapore reaction to I from what I heard from you, the response from the public of in Singapore was pretty positive, and I think almost everyone is willing to do vaccination. But for in case take Indonesia as an example, I think there's many people are receiving fake news that vaccine is doing vaccination could be wrong for your body and so on. What do you think differs the positive reaction from Singapore to the comparing to maybe Indonesia, I guess?
I mean, I can't deny that when the vaccine first came, Singapore has this tendency, or we call ourselves like kiasi, which is like we're afraid of death. Kiasu also, which is like we're afraid of losing. So I think the government understood the constraints that they have, or the challenges that they have when they first brought in, or when they are going to introduce the vaccine. Firstly, a group of people are known to be demographically kiasi, like you're afraid of death, right? So, a lot of us have this sit and wait policy where we go like, oh, if you get the vaccine first, I'll see if anything happens to you. And then if nothing happens over like a couple of weeks, I will get it. I'm sure all of us have that mentality, right? When you're given the choice. Because, I mean, to be honest, it's human nature. Like, you do not know what is the side effects of this. And whether or not 5 to 10 years something's going to happen, you don't know. So it's really a risk. It's really a gamble. It's more of weighing the two evils. Like, is receiving the vaccine better than getting a contracted COVID-19? So, of course, the logical sense is the government does encourage. So, in terms of having news, they will show like the prime minister getting their vaccine, so and so, like this minister got their vaccine. They will make like a media out of it, to get the news rolling. Like, hey, if these people, given their age, given their profile, are not afraid of receiving the vaccine, you shouldn't be afraid as well. Which I'm sure is also what Indonesia is using to engage their population. President Joko Widodo had his vaccine first, right? And he had this massive news. I'm sure it's on the frontline covers. It's on in my Instagram. I'm sure it was like the number one news trending for that day, right? So, and of course, again, in America, President Joe Biden had his vaccine, then Kamala Harris had her vaccine. So it's kind of how you convince the public that if people of status and power are not afraid of receiving the vaccine, despite, not knowing what the adverse effects are, then why should you be afraid? Right? So I think Singapore has taken that strategy to kind of prepare other Singaporeans to take the vaccine and be more positive about the COVID-19 vaccine.
Right. So speaking about convincing the public, I was also wondering if religious restrictions have pose any challenges to the distribution of the vaccine. For example, I think the holy month of Ramadan is coming soon, right? And Muslims are going to fast. And in Indonesia, there was a few statements issued by the Indonesian Ulama Council stating the religious, the halal or haram aspects of the vaccine. So, is there such a thing in Singapore as well? Did the government issue perhaps any statements regarding religion and the vaccine?
Yeah. Of course, Singapore had the same restrictions as well. I mean, we have the 4 different races in Singapore, Chinese, Malay, Indians, and of course the other Europeans or Eurasians ethnicity. Of course, religion does play a role, but I think we took a similar strategy, or as in Singapore had the same strategy as Indonesia, where they had the religious leaders come out and say, hey, it's halal, take the vaccine, it's safe. They are in line with the government strategy. So the thing about Singapore is when they roll out a policy or when they come up with like a national immunization scheme, it's something that is from the top down. So they ensure that the major organizations or the major stakeholders and influencers are in line with what the government wants to achieve. So it's only when they have a common goal of achieving this herd immunity, where they understand that they want to get the general population vaccinated, that they can then stand unified and send a similar message across media outlets, across religious outlets, across the general public, to kind of convince the general population, not by not by a coercion method, but more of a conducive and convincing approach and a logical approach to say that, hey, COVID is here. It's not something that we can change, but what can we do to make the situation better? So I think the government has kind of engaged all of the major stakeholders to be in line with their end goal, to ensure that everyone who has a voice or has an influence are kind of in the same direction in the message that they're sending out.
I see. And Jen, maybe I should ask this question earlier before, but as you mentioned that in Singapore in the Q3, everyone in Singapore should be vaccinated by then. But because of this, I believe that the vaccination is on process right now, right? So is there any differences on the policy that is implemented in Singapore? I mean, like the public response is it still strict to go outside, or is it relaxed a bit?
I think now we still have this safe distancing measures. Things that didn't change is you still have to wear a mask to go out. Things that didn't change is that there's only a social gathering magic number of 8. There's only 8 packs that can gather at any one point in time. But the thing that has changed is since starting next week, which is 5th of April, work from home is no longer the mandatory mode of work. Companies can choose to bring their staff back to the main office to work. But of course they have to ensure that the safe distancing measures are in place to ensure that it's not overcrowded, that there is a 1 meter distancing. So I think that's the biggest change. I don't know if Singaporeans are happy about going to work back in office, but that is one of the major changes. But in terms of major changes, not so much. I think wedding capacity is increased to 250, if I'm not wrong. Religious place of gatherings, I think, was increased to 100, or was it 200? I think, yeah. So in general, they didn't relax the things that we have to do. We still have to, stay clean, wear our mask, make sure that when we're sick, we don't go to work. We are issued like a 5 days medical certificate if we have like cough, cold, or flu. Things like that. Keeping good hygiene doesn't change. What just changes is basically, I think the government is constantly relooking whether or not to increase the number of people that is able to gather at one point of time.
Yeah, I have a question in terms of like events. We know like people loves gathering, and like in the Philippines, if there are gatherings, like most of them are requiring like PCR tests. to show that there are negatives, since the vaccine is still not really available in the Philippines, not that much. There's a very, very few numbers of vaccines. How about in Singapore? Do they require you to be vaccinated, or do they require you to take tests before you attend certain events?
Right. So when you go to an event, right now we have a capping, meaning that there is a maximum number that you can have. Cross-mingling is not allowed. So what they mean by cross-mingling is if you are in a particular area or particular zone, you are supposed to stay in that zone. There are different scenarios for this, and it differs from scenario to scenario, meaning if you're having a wedding, the requirements or the restrictions are different than if you're having like a business conference meeting. So what happens is if you're having a wedding, you don't necessarily need to go through like what we call an ART, which is a rapid testing where the results are out within 15 minutes. Yeah. I think it's a swab, but it's a swab at a different region. It's not all the way to your nasal area, but somewhere in the front. So the results are out within 15 minutes. I think if you're having a wedding, you don't necessarily need that. But if you have a business conference and you have a people of about 150 packs, you have to zone it into 50 per zone, 50 packs per zone, meaning if it's a ballroom equivalent, your space can have 3 zones of 50. And people in that zone is designated an area of 8 people or 5, and they can only stay there. They can't like cross to the second zone and then go back to the first zone. No. The logic behind that, of course, is to minimize contamination while still having an event. Other than that, not so much of a restrictions. It's just that if you have a mass event, if you have a big event, you will need to go through this ART. So in Singapore as well, I think one thing to note is we do have a cruise. We have this thing called Cruise to Nowhere. I don't know if you've heard in the news.
Yeah, I've heard.
Yeah, so basically you take the cruise, but you don't stop at a particular place. You just go on the cruise to kind of have some leisure because they have entertainment on the cruise. And of course, at the back of it is it gets the economy kind of back to not say completely healthy levels, but somewhat recovers certain or minimizes the negative impact due to the standstill, especially for the cruise industry. So what they do is they have these Cruise to Nowhere where couples, individuals will board the cruise, and then before they board the cruise, they need to do this swab, the ART, the one that comes out in 15 minutes. If it comes out negative, then they can board the cruise. If it comes out positive, then they will call the relevant authorities to kind of have them go for like a proper swab to ensure that their results is really positive or negative. So you do need to go through certain testing, and I think that would be also the new normal if moving forward, even when people get vaccinated. Of course, now they're discussing if I am vaccinated, do I still need to go through this ART, or can I just show my certificate and then get like a free entrance inside? They're discussing. It's not confirmed. Nothing has been confirmed. It's just in the talks. Yeah, it's still in the discussion. The government is discussing about it, but nothing has been confirmed yet.
So Jen, you mentioned about the cruise, and it just made me wonder which recreational spaces are open. The cruise is one, like you mentioned, and I imagine the public park are open because it's on an open area. But what about like the USS, Universal Studio? And I think Singapore has a pretty limited option in terms of recreational spaces. So what about, the clubs, or I don't know, maybe you can answer that.
I think I'm quite fortunate. I'm in Singapore at the right time, I feel. Because in terms of recreation, although it's limited, but I'm thankful that I think the Singapore government did take hold of the situation really, really promptly. If you compare us with other regions, if you compare us with other countries, I think the Singapore government did an extremely good job in terms of managing the COVID-19 situations. They identified the hotspots. They tackled the hotspots. They kept it to a minimum. They quarantined the people. They segregated the area to ensure that the community spread is very, very minimal. We have had days where we had zero contamination, like zero COVID contractions, which I think is commendable. And it does go to show the hard work and the superb planning that the government has. So in terms of opening up our recreations, I would have to say that it was pretty early on. I think since June, July, was it too soon? I think about August to September, like recreation places were open. We had restrictions from like 5 minutes and then 5 packs, and then it went up to 8 packs gathering. And it was only possible because the government was able to cap the COVID-19 contamination to a very, very minimal number. So that being said, yeah.
Oh, yes. Sorry, I was just wondering, like, when you say packs, does it mean people?
Yeah, people. So we say packs, yeah. 5 packs, 8 packs.
Sorry for interrupting.
It's okay. So what I was going to say is when Singapore wanted to encourage people to go out, I mean, of course, it's a balance, right? You want people to go out to kind of stimulate the economy, but you also want them to stay safe. So they want to make sure that they don't contradict, like stay home, stay safe. So what they did was they allowed people to go out. But of course, the companies have to limit the number. Things like safe entry, you need to scan a QR code so that the government can know where you are. It's also for government to track that people are not overcrowding in one particular place. People have to take their temperature before they go in. For example, medical appointments, you need to make appointment first. So government need to ensure that all these things are in place, all the framework are in place. Then they welcome the people. Like, okay, how they did that was they introduced these Singapore Rediscover vouchers to encourage people to, even though you cannot go overseas to travel, you can rediscover Singapore in places that you didn't know exist. So I think the government had to balance and ensure that while you are staying home and staying safe, we slowly open up to tell you that it's safe to go out, but there is a regulation that you need to stay safe. And then people, Singaporeans can use this Singapore Rediscover vouchers. Everyone was given $100. Of course, PR was not included in this, but Singaporeans were given like $100 each, that they can use to either go visit an attraction or go for a staycation or enjoy some entertainment, dining. So they can use this to their advantage, basically. So what this does is, of course, it's a way for the government to sustain certain businesses, but it's also to ensure that Singaporeans are given the message that, or encouragement that your effort of staying home and staying safe in phase 1 and phase 2 actually does benefit you, because in phase 3, you can slowly enjoy the entertainment and new normal. You get to enjoy life in the new normal. Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing. I can only imagine doing that in Indonesia, our home country. It must be pretty. I would say that it's impossible, maybe because of our population, but I think we can learn a lot from the what do you call it, the $100 gift card. Yeah. Voucher. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Jen, for the answers for for regarding the public response. Many information that you give us during the session is very insightful, and maybe because of this episode, we wanted to talk about the vaccination. We want to discuss about the vaccination itself. As you mentioned before, you did you did receive your vaccination, isn't it, Jen?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. How many times did you receive already by right now? 2. Okay. So Pfizer. Okay. So during the vaccination program, can you tell us a bit about did you experience any discomfort or side effects maybe that you receive?
Are you alive and well, Jen? That's what we're asking. Okay.
I was laughing because I had to volunteer at the vaccination center. So not only did I receive the vaccine, but after I received the vaccine, I had to go and tell the people and repeat. And I had to repeat in hundreds. I wasn't kidding, in hundreds, because I was doing like the discharge and the registration as well. So I had to do it in hundreds times. I had to repeat this line when they register. I have to say, "Hi sir, do you have fever? Are you feeling unwell? Have you had antibiotics in the last 14 days? Do you receive a vaccine in the last 14 days? If all the answer is like no, then okay sir, this is your label. This is your appointment timing for your second vaccine. Please come again after 14 days to receive your second vaccine." And I let him go, to the vaccination booth. And after he's done, I have to say, they have to wait for like 30 minutes, by the way, to see if they faint or like they have any side effects during the time. If not, then they get discharged. So before they can go off, we have to kind of discharge the patient. So in the counter, we would say, "Hi sir, how was your vaccination? Did you experience any discomfort?" And all of them would say like, no, I feel perfectly fine. And then in your heart and in your face, like you tell them, "Yes, sir, or sir or ma'am, you'll be perfectly fine now, but tomorrow or tonight you will feel a little bit of soreness in your arms. You'll feel slightly tired, and that's completely normal. If you have a fever, you drink a paracetamol, and then you would feel fine." So this was actually in the vaccination card that we give them, because they need to take 2 doses, right? So to kind of remind them about their next appointment, we give them a vaccination card. I can show you mine later as well. So they would receive that card that tells them what are the possible side effects, and then what they're supposed to do if they had the side effect. I think I must say that the first vaccine, the first dose, wasn't as bad, for lack of a better word. It wasn't as bad as the second dose. So the first dose, all I experienced was like a soreness around my arm. You feel extremely tired. You feel sleepy, extremely sleepy compared to normal days. Which is a normal side effect. The second dose, however, a lot of my colleagues, myself included, we actually had a fever in the second day, so which is also a common side effect. Of course, if the fever didn't subside in the second or the third day, then they would have to be, they are encouraged to visit a doctor, because then the doctor would advise. But if their fever could be resolved with like paracetamol, a good night's sleep, then it's completely normal. It's a normal side effect when you introduce like a new strain into your body. So I survived. I can say that I'm vaccinated. I don't know if I'm completely immune to COVID-19 virus. What they do, I have to say, is that they increase your resistance, but that doesn't mean that you're completely safe. So of course, don't be complacent. Wear your mask. If you're sick, honestly, don't go to work. Just be a responsible citizen, especially during a pandemic, is what I would advise. Take the vaccine because it does help herd immunity. But of course, it's a personal choice. I don't believe in forcing people to take the vaccine. If for religious reasons or for personal reasons, you don't want to take the vaccine, I think that it's your choice. I personally took it because I just felt that it was socially responsible. That I don't want to be a spreader. Like I didn't want to contract and spread. Of course, it doesn't mean that I'm completely kind of not gonna get COVID. I think I had this conversation with Andrew before, that I wasn't really 100% on board, but I will still take the vaccine because I feel that it minimizes the chance of me spreading to other people. But of course, again, personal choice, get the vaccine or not, just be comfortable with your choice. I will have to say that of the people who received the vaccine in Singapore, there wasn't any fatalities reported. So, from a personal standpoint, I took it because it was just what I felt was right. Yeah. But of course, your body, your choice. I wouldn't.
Yeah, my grandparents live in Singapore and they also got vaccinated, and so far they haven't felt any major discomfort. So that's great as well. Yeah.
Really get a discomfort. If you have, then go to a doctor, please. But yeah, I can show you how the card looks like. After you get vaccinated, you get like something like, I can't show you everything because it has my personal details, but it looks something like that. Right? And If you open it, you will actually see which vaccine that you actually got. I can show you. I mean, I took it on these dates, location where I took it, and then you can see whether you took Moderna or Pfizer. If you have a side effect, this is basically what you should do. And yeah, so once you get both ticks, this kind of certifies that you had the vaccine. Yeah.
You need to bring it everywhere and maybe show it in case, you need to go into like places.
This was something that I was just informed, I think yesterday. Apparently if you get vaccinated, because they use your like national registration identity card, NRIC we call it. So in like Indonesian context is your KTP number. So because they register you by that identification number, so when you get the vaccine, basically the government would know. So in Singapore, we also have this app called SingPass. So SingPass is basically where they have all your identity cards and, your school records, everything on that portal, your financial records as well, your tax returns. So that's basically where they store that information. I haven't checked it, whether my vaccination record is inside. I think if it is, then I don't have to bring that card around. But I just have it in my wallet because I just put it in. I don't know where to put it.
Yeah. I totally agree with Jen's argument that we have to be social responsible, and also adding to that, I think the end goal of vaccination is not to distinguish. How do you say it? Not to how do you say it? Not to disappear the COVID-19 virus itself. I think it's more for the so that the hospitalization rate can be reduced, so that we feel that when we are infected by COVID, it's not we are not having that heavy symptoms, but we should see that as a maybe kind of like a flu, I guess, in the future. Yes.
Okay, so, I think one thing that I can share with you guys is I just recalled, I have this brochure. So basically this is what's given to people who receive like the COVID-19 vaccine. Yeah, so it's like a sheet of paper. Kibo, stop it! Where they would actually indicate, or like people would read about this, and they have it in different languages for the elderly. Yeah. And basically people read this before they get the vaccine. So they know so they can expect all these and what to do in case they face it.
Jen, I want to discuss something with you actually. You but can you listen? Okay. So you did mention that it's your body, your choice. But we're kind of facing a social dilemma, as in, especially for Indonesia, who were maybe not as well educated as people in Singapore. They may face, fear of getting vaccinated, and if you use that approach in Indonesia, of your body, your choice, and maybe a little bit of, putting maybe a religion restriction as well on top of that. That could be very dangerous to the whole society, I guess. Like, what do you think about this? How do you think countries as big as Indonesia or maybe the United States as well should face this dilemma?
I think the situation in Singapore is different. It's like you can't really enforce like a one size fits all. Of course in Singapore, like it didn't have, if you don't wear a mask, you will get fined. That was an imposition. But what I'm saying is whether you receive a vaccine or not is not something that you can be fined against. It's not something that you will be penalized for not doing. I think, what I can say is introducing a foreign item or like a foreign vaccine, a foreign whatever is not as simple as wearing a mask, right? You can't equate one to the other. If it involves religion, it really goes into the line of personal choice, right? I I would say that I still stand in the belief that your decision, your choice, even though it may have a negative impact on the society, but I feel that if you're not comfortable with it and if you feel that it's invasive, then, and you're not comfortable in making that choice, and nobody can guarantee that in 5 to 10 years, there will not be a negative impact, right? So I can't say that, yes, everyone must get vaccinated. I can't be the social vigilante and say that if you don't get vaccinated, like, you don't respect the society. But again, getting a vaccine is not as easy as wearing a mask. Yes, wearing a mask is uncomfortable. Yes, it's intrusive. But it's not something that will hurt you physically, right? Except for, maybe pimples and breakouts. But it's not something that would physically cause you pain. Receiving a vaccine is different. It's something foreign. It's something that you might have to live with for the rest of your life if something negative happens. So I would still stand by the choice if it's your personal choice, really. And there's nobody that can force you to take the vaccine, or not. I would have to say that, the government does have some plans, where if a person has a negative impact because of the COVID-19 vaccine, that they may be covered under some national scheme. But you see, that is just how vague it is. That is just how gray the area is. Even in Singapore, like, you can't impose. It's a personal right. So it's, to me, I still stand by my stance that it's your decision whether you get vaccinated or not, because nobody can guarantee for a fact that in 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line, you won't get a negative impact, right? And if you do, who are you going to blame? Like, who's going to be responsible for that foreign injection in your body, right? So I still stand by that decision. But that is the context of it. Of course, it's different if you have like 100 years of experiments and it's completely effective, then yes. But with new COVID-19 variants coming up, Moderna and Pfizer is only effective to some variants. Does that mean you need more vaccines? Does that mean that you need to constantly be vaccinated? These are still vague. So I think give people the chance to kind of just step back and decide on their own whether or not they want to be vaccinated.
Right. And I think if I can respond to Andrew's question as well, and just to add a bit more to what Jen mentioned, I do think that if, let's say, the public's trust in the vaccine is low, making it legally mandatory is not going to solve the problem as well. So, I think the best way to do it would be to socialize the public into, or try to convince them into, to convince them and for them to make their own, for them to decide to take the vaccine themselves. So, for example, if there are religious restrictions, then you cooperate with religious figures to try to find middle ground there. Right? Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so yeah, we've talked for about 45 minutes by right now. And I think
I think like to talk.
Yeah, it's okay, Jen. It's okay, Jen. We just want to thank you once again for having your the time that you gave to us for our question today. And yeah, and I hope we stay healthy.
Stay healthy, guys. Stay safe.
Yeah, stay healthy and stay safe. Thank you, Jen, for today. And thank you very much, Jen.
Thank you.
Guys.
Stay safe.
Love from Singapore to everywhere from my dog.
Okay, so that's our episode with our guest, Jen. So yeah, what do you think, Aki, about our episode with Jen?
It was really, I would say, an insightful talk with Jen. I really admire how the Singaporean government managed the rollout of the COVID vaccines. Because as Jen mentioned, they go phases, right? They divide it by age range, and then they also build vaccination centers so that everything will go smoothly. So as you can see from here, they are very well planned and they handled it very, very well. In addition, you can see that it is advancing. It is moving forward as they are like I think every week, not every week, but like after a few weeks, they changes like the phases or the age range that they give the vaccination, right? But that doesn't mean that Singapore is doing well. The other countries is not doing well. I mean, it doesn't mean that they are rolling the vaccination fast. The other countries is not doing their job or something like that. Just like, for example, Japan. Japan, we all know like they're very developed, but but you can see how slow, I should say, they are in terms of distributing the vaccines. It because they have their own reasons, and like I think one of the main reasons is that unlike any other countries, Japan requires more clinical tests in terms of approving the vaccines to be distributed. So for Japan, like I think a drug analyst said that they are more focusing on the risks than the rewards. So it's better to be safe, even though the vaccines are less effective. So you can see here, like, how even though, like, the approach that the Singapore adopted might not be also, like, effective to other countries because they face, each countries face different struggles and also resources, I should say.
I think we also need to take into account, I suppose, the country's history and culture.
That's true.
Because Japan actually has a bad experience with vaccines before. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure if you know the detail. Well, yeah, basically Japan had a terrible experience with vaccines before, so that might be also a contributing factor as to why Japan has not been as fast as other developed countries in terms of vaccines. So, yeah.
Interesting. Didn't know about that. But go ahead, Dick. Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna kind of retract back to the interview, and Jen gave me a lot of new perspectives on seeing vaccination. I'm gonna relate it kind of to my country, which is Indonesia, and we do have a lot of cases. It's like raising cases every day, right? And living here, I always kind of live in constant fear because I live with my parents, with my grandma, and I kind of have to surround myself with people who are knowledgeable about vaccination, which, well, most of them are doctors. And because they are doctors, usually they really, really encourage people to take the vaccination, right? And so, talking to someone who is, I wouldn't say skeptical, but, always question about vaccination in general, it's a really fresh perspective. It gives me a lot of new insights and gives me new things to consider as well. That's how I see it.
Right. I think, Andrew, what you said just now about fear, because again, like this is a podcast about peace, right? So like, how would you like relate this COVID and vaccines with peace? And I think what you said, what you mentioned about fear says a lot about that, right? Because if you remember I think if our viewers watch our episode 0, we did mention that one of the ways we can define peace is that, or this is how I define peace, is that it's being able to go outside without having to fear about without having to fear about our safety and well-being, right? So even though, like, I guess the pandemic or diseases such as this, usually you don't really think about that when you talk about peace, right? But it is a very important aspect of peace. It's related to human security. It's related to like your ability, like to perform, to basically do your activities. So with COVID, you can't, you kind of live in fear and worry as well, right? So that's also like a very, that's also a very big, so this is also a very big aspect of peace. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, just to add on a bit to your idea of peace, Joe, I do think on the bright side, COVID gave me a lot of time to reflect on myself, to find my inner peace, like Master Uguay once said.
Wow.
So, I think, like you said, peace has a lot of, shapes, different shapes. And I do think that, you can always look at the bright side of things. In this case, inner peace.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, like, hopefully, like this case, like this COVID case, is gonna be a wake up call, I guess, to the world, because this is actually something. I don't know if you noticed, but this is actually something that has been kind of predicted. Like there has been a lot of talks about how in the past, before COVID happened, like there has been a lot of talks about how the world is not ready if the next pandemic hits. It's actually been discussed in, I think there's a Netflix series called Explain. I think they had an episode about pandemic, and that was before, if I remember correctly, that's before COVID. And also Bill Gates also talked about that, although now there are some conspiracy theories.
So Bill Gates was the one who created it.
But no, basically there were already a lot of talks like before COVID happened about like, okay, if there's a pandemic, if there's a pandemic coming, we're not ready for it. And well, you see with the state of the world now, it's quite messed up. So like, hopefully, like this is like a wake up call to the world as well. I guess with COVID happening, maybe next time we'll be hopefully more ready. If next pandemic happens, because who's to say that this will be like the last pandemic?
That's true. That's true. And personally, I did learn many things throughout the interview with Jen, especially on how Singapore is very planned to deliver their vaccine. They have the clear goal of achieving 75 all of their population to be vaccinated by, if I remember correctly, is in the third semester of this year. And I think other countries, especially Indonesia, because I think the policy in Indonesia is in my country is a bit how do you say it, unclear, and there is some flaw into it, and clearly and efficiently. I do think so as well. And also, as Joe mentioned before, I think it relates to human security. I think during this pandemic, all of the people, like from young to elderly people, are disrupted by this pandemic happening. Because take an example for us youth currently, it's very hard to have a job, to live your own life. It also relates to your mental health and so on. And I do really think that this COVID-19 pandemic, it's really complicated to all of us that is living in this current period. Yes. So I think this is all from us from the episode with Jen, and I hope you guys
I hope you also enjoy our first episode.
Yes.
Our first episode.
Yes.
And just also to remind you, we will be uploading a new episode tomorrow. So stay tuned.
Is it tomorrow?
Yes. Because we are the weekend babies.
Is that our fan name? What is this?
No. Just wait for it tomorrow.
Okay.
I hope you
tomorrow,
stay tuned with us again tomorrow.
Yeah, and that's all from us. And as per usual, peace.
Peace out.
Out.